There was a congregation got a new preacher, and this guy had preached a couple of weeks, and then one Sunday he got up and he announced, says, I've got a special sermon for next week, but I need you to do some homework for me. I need you to read the book of Hezekiah. And so if you would go home this week and read the book of Hezekiah. So he came back the next Sunday. He says, all right, I gave you a homework assignment. Just show of hands, how many of you read Hezekiah? About 3/4 of the group raised their hands. Yes, they had. I says, okay. There is no book called Hezekiah in the Bible, so I want to preach my sermon on lying tonight. So I have never, in 40 years of preaching, preached a sermon on lying. And so tonight, I want to talk about God knows you're lying. It's one of those very fundamental sins. In fact, I want you to think about the earliest moral dilemma that you faced. If you can remember as a child, the earliest moral decision you had to make, the choice that you had to make, was it about lying? It most likely was. Do I tell the truth or do I tell a lie? It's something we all have to deal with, and our parents kind of protect us from some of those other moral choices we have to make, but that's one that's up here in the head. It's something we have to decide. It's something we have control of. Do I tell the truth or do I tell a lie? And the lie is our nature. That's what comes most natural to us. And so we're going to be all over the Bible, and so you can get out your outline if you would, and you'll notice we're going to start in Acts 5. You can turn there. But I want to talk about 3 points. We're going to talk about why do people lie. I'm going to talk about when is it okay to lie. And then we'll get really practical and talk about how can I stop lying. So number one, why do people lie? 4 basic reasons that people lie. Number one, people lie to make themselves look good. You know, we often think if I just told the truth, that's kind of boring. You know, and so I'll spice it up a little bit. I'll add a little something, and then that will make me look better than I probably am. And that seems to be something that's important to people. You see the pictures on Facebook. Somebody puts their picture out there on Facebook, and they have photoshopped the devil out of that thing. You know, it doesn't even look like them anymore. And they put that up there. Why do they do that? They want those comments. Oh, you're so pretty. You're so beautiful. And it's kind of a way of lying, is it not? When we do things like that. There's a lot of lying that goes on in social media. People do it to make themselves look good. In Acts chapter 5, there's a fella and his wife, and they wanted to make themselves look good. Let's read it together. Acts chapter 5, starting in verse 1. But a man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, they sold a piece of property. Now they kept back some of the price for himself, with his wife's full knowledge, and bringing a portion of it, he laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back some of the price of the land? Now, while it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not under your control? Why is it that you have conceived this deed in your heart? You've not lied to men, but to God. And as he heard these words, Ananias fell down and he breathed his last. And great fear came over all who heard of it. The young men got up and covered him up, and after carrying him out, they buried him. Ananias sold his property. He brought it, he laid it at the feet of the apostles. He says, here is the full price. We sold our property. Here's everything that we got out of that. We want to give 100% of it to the church. The problem was not that he kept back part of the money. That's what Peter was saying to him when he says, before it was sold, it was your own to do with what you wanted to. You didn't have to sell it. But notice he also says, after it was sold, it was still under your control. There was nothing wrong with him if he would have said, hey, we brought half of this and we want to give it to the Lord. Would that not have been grand? I mean, if somebody did that today, I think we would be pretty thrilled that they made a sacrifice like that. But no, he wanted to say he gave it all. This was the whole thing. He lied. He lied. Maybe you want to jump on the bandwagon. If you back up to chapter 4, start in verse 34, we see that, for there was not a needy person among them. This is talking about the early church. For all who were owners of land or houses would sell them. They bring the proceeds of the sales, lay them at the apostles' feet. They would be distributed to each as he had need. Now Joseph, a Levite of Cyprian birth, who was also called Barnabas by the apostles. And this is the famous Barnabas that traveled with Paul on his missionary journeys, which translated means son of encouragement. And he owned a tract of land, and he sold it, and he brought the money, and he laid it at the apostles' feet. Maybe Ananias had been watching all that, says, hey, I want people to think I did that too, but I can't afford that. I'm not maybe as rich as some others, and so, but I'm just going to say that I did it. And he lied to make himself look good. We won't read the rest, but his wife falls under the same fate. She lies about it as well. She also dies. This is not a fable, by the way. This actually happened. This is history. This actually happened in the first century. You know, those who say they don't like the God of the Old Testament because he's so mean, they may not have read this and noticed this is in the New Testament. Okay? Same God. You don't trifle with God. I've been thinking a lot about this passage this week, and I wrote a question here in my notes. Maybe you'll think about this with me. How did Peter know? I've read this passage several times. It doesn't really say. How did Peter know that Ananias was being dishonest, that he had lied about the price? Maybe divine intervention. I mean, he was an apostle. Maybe God had told him. Maybe some other brother had told him, knew about the sale, and says, hey, you know, he said this, he really did. I don't know. Maybe you could tell by looking at him. Because sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you can spot a liar. But sometimes you can't. And if you've been in the school system, or if you've ever worked with criminals, some of them are better at lying than others. Some are really good at it. And some you can catch, and some you can't. But people lie to make themselves look good. Number 2, people lie to make others look bad. And that kind of goes with the first one, because sometimes we want to make ourselves look good by making others look bad. But there's people that will lie just to make other people look bad. This one in Psalms 31, verse 18 says, let the lying lips be mute, which speak arrogantly against the righteous with pride and contempt. Some speak against the righteous, those who are doing the right thing, because they want to make them look bad. Why? Because of contempt. They have contempt. They have an anger and aggression toward these people. And so they make up lies. They say things about them to make them look bad. They don't want them to get their way. They don't want things to go well for them. And so they make up a lie. David in his psalm, Psalm 109 verse 2 says, for they have opened the wicked and deceitful mouth against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue. That's the motive of some people. They just want to make other people look bad. Third reason why people lie. People lie because they don't have a conscience. It just flat doesn't bother them. You know that passage in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2 says, by means of hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience as with a branding iron. And oh, by the way, the pictures have nothing to do with the sermon. I have a friend who's a professional wildlife photographer up in Canada, and he sent them to me. I thought, hey, I'll just put them in the PowerPoint. So, some people, their consciences have been seared as with a branding iron. Most of us have actually seen a branding iron and what it does to skin. You know how it hardens it. Sometimes our conscience gets that same way because we've lied and lied so many times that it doesn't faze us anymore. You know, a lie detector test, the way that works, it doesn't really detect whether you're telling the truth or not. It detects changes in your physiology. Lying is stressful if you have a conscience at all. Now there's people that lie detector tests don't work on. Guess which group of people that is? Those who have just gotten so hard that it doesn't even faze them. No physiological change whatsoever, whether they're telling the truth or telling a lie. There's people like that. They lie because it doesn't make one whit of difference to them whether they're telling the truth or they're not telling the truth. And then fourthly, some lie for no reason whatsoever. I don't know what to tell you. There's just some people that just do. And they have nothing to gain from it. They lie anyway. Jesus said this about Satan. You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father, who's the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and he is the father of lies. There's some people, and that is just what they do. They just lie. You know what I'm talking about. We've all met people like that. I hope you're not one of those who just is a compulsive liar, where people can't even trust anything that you say. Meghan Trainor has a song out called Your Lips Are Moving. The words of the song go, I know you lie because your lips are moving. Tell me, do you think I'm dumb? I might be young, but I ain't stupid. Talking around in circles with your tongue. Being a liar. Some of you don't know that song. The young people are eating that up. Psalms 116, verse 11. This isn't in your notes. I said in my alarm, all men are liars. You know, a lot of times I'll see these things on media or on commercials where somebody will claim, you know, the Lord spoke to me and he said we're supposed to send money to Argentina, and so please send your money to this and this place. Or a vision appeared to me, a man in shining bright clothes said, send the money here. You know, I see those things, and it's really hard to argue with experience and tell somebody they probably didn't have that experience, but you know what? They probably didn't have that experience. Can you imagine telling a lie like that and standing before God on Judgment Day and explaining something like that? Can you imagine? God saying, now, I need to ask you about this. You said this vision, there was no vision. You said, I told you this. I didn't tell you that. There's lots of different kinds of liars in the world. Psalms 116 says all men are liars. It is our nature. You have to teach yourself to tell you the truth. We have to teach our children how to tell the truth because lying comes naturally. It's the easy way out. It's harder. It is harder to say, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to face the consequences here. Yes, I did that. I was talking earlier with Chase about America's Funniest Videos. They always have those ones where the little kid and the mommy's filming to say, were you in the chocolate cookies? And the kid says no, and they got chocolate cookie all over their face and all over the floor. No, I wasn't in them. You know, that's our nature. It's our nature to lie. But it's not good. In fact, let's talk about that next. When is it okay to lie? Is there ever situations that we face where it's understandable to tell a lie and it's okay if we do that? Well, let me mention first of all, number one, that lying is an abomination before God. Let's go to the book of Proverbs. Chapter 6. Where is that? Is that still after Psalms? Oh yeah, there it is. Proverbs chapter 6. And verse 16. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. And if you don't know what that is, the 6 things and then 7, that is a figure of speech. It's a Hebraic figure of speech, and I tried to look up the name of it. I can't remember. I believe it's called numeric progression. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. But there's, Amos wears this out, where he'll say for 3 sins, actually for 4. That's, you give a number and then you give the next higher number to call emphasis to a point, to call attention. But he lists 7 things here that are an abomination to him, meaning to God. Here's the list, verse 17. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among the brothers. Now, if you look in verse 17 through 19, there's 7 things that are listed there that are an abomination to God. It's detestable. It's horrific in the sight of God. He can't stand it. The second one in the list there is the one we're talking about, a lying tongue. After haughty eyes is a lying tongue. But what's interesting is he lists 3 more in verse 18. And then in verse 19, he says a false witness who utters lies. Now, doesn't that sound a lot like the second one? He says a lying tongue, that's abomination to God. And by the way, so is a false witness who utters lies. Boy, that sounds really similar. He mentions it twice in this list of 7 things that the Lord can't stand. That tells you how bad lying is. Lying is horrible. At least it was in my house growing up. There's a lot of things you could get away with my mom, but if you got caught lying, whoo, that was the worst. That was the worst. Lying. In God's house, it's an abomination. It's a horrible thing. So, number 2, we are commanded to imitate God, and we know that God never lies. So is there a situation we could face where it's okay to lie? I want to look at Joshua chapter 2. Because in this discussion, the name Rahab comes up. Rahab was the woman who protected the spies. And some teach that, she lied to protect those spies, and so there are situations where it's okay to lie. I'd like to talk about that. And in order to do that, we've got to read the whole thing. I wrestled with this. I didn't want to do it unless it was really necessary, but I think you need to see the whole story. So read this with me if you would. Joshua chapter 2, starting in verse 1, says, "And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly to Shittim, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.' And so they went and they came into the house of the harlot, whose name was Rahab. And they lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, saying, 'Behold, men of the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land.' And the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And it came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark, that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up on the roof and hidden them among the stalks of the flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan, to the fords, and as soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof, and she said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of all has fallen, or of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you, for the Lord your God, He is God in heaven, above and on the earth beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also will deal kindly with my father's household, and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, and my sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." So the men said to her, "Our life for yours, if you do not tell this business of ours, and it shall come about, when the Lord gives us the land, that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you." When Rahab was approached by the king of Jericho, he says, "I want you to bring those men out." Her response was, "They're not here anymore." Now, I didn't even know where they were from, by the way. But they left right before the gates closed, and I don't know where they went. Now that was a lie. I know some have tried to justify this passage, and that's why I wanted you to read the whole thing so you would know. She definitely lied. She did know who they were and where they were from. She did know that they had not left. She knew exactly where they were. They were up on a roof. And so she unquestionably lied. I want you also to notice that she's not an Israelite. She's not a child of God. But by her talk, she is interested in God. She's coming to a faith in God. You could kind of think of her as a young believer. And so young believers don't often know all the things they should and shouldn't do. You know, some say, well, it was okay that she lied because she was commended for that. She was commended for that in the New Testament. Well, let's look at those commendations. The first one is in James chapter 2, where she is mentioned. James 2, verse 25. Says, "In the same way was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works?" Now, if you read the verse before, he's talking about how our works are important because that's a sign of our faith. She's justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way. Now, what was she commended for? She was commended for receiving the spies, being kind to them, and sending them out safely. That's what she was commended for. Was she commended for lying in this passage? No, not in this one. Well, maybe the other one in Hebrews chapter 11. She's also mentioned there. Let's look at that one. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 31. which says, by faith, Rahab the harlot did not perish along with those who were disobedient after she had welcomed the spies in peace. Now again, was she commended for lying? Or was she commended and recognized because she welcomed the spies? You see, just because somebody is honored for their faith doesn't mean that God condoned or agreed with everything that they did. Look at verse 7. By faith Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his household. Now Noah is commended for the things that he did in building the ark. But was Noah commended for everything that he did? Was he commended for getting drunk in chapter 9 and exposing himself, and his son saw his nakedness? Is that something that is okay because he was commended for his faith? Well, obviously not. Moses, look at verse 24. By faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. Moses was commended for his great faith. Does that mean that God agreed with everything that Moses did? Was God in agreement when he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand? No. And so, Rahab was commended for her faith, not for her lying. We have to remember that justification of sin is always attractive. And so there are always people who want to say, well, yeah, this is a sin, but it's okay if you do it this way because then it's really not the worst sin. And that those arguments are always going to be out there. But the Bible really doesn't teach situation ethics. It doesn't say that this is wrong in this situation, but it's right in this other situation. It doesn't teach that. Lying is wrong. And it's always wrong. But what about when you're protecting others? What about if your lie could save the life of somebody else? What if it could save your own life? Should you lie then? No, you shouldn't. God does not lie. Look at Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 18. So that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie. God does not lie. And then Titus chapter 1 verse 2 here on the screen says, in the hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised long ages ago. God does not lie. Ephesians 5 verse 1 says we are to be imitators of God. If God does not lie, and we are His children, we should not lie under any circumstances, even to protect a life, be it our own life or someone else's life. And I know this is a tough situation, but think about what we've been learning in the book of Revelation. Point number 3 here. Being faithful is more important than being alive, is it not? Revelation chapter 2 verse 10 says, do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. Those Christians in the 7 churches of Asia Minor, our first century brethren, would have somebody knock on their door, and it would be the soldiers. And they say, are you followers of that Jesus? Are you ones who have been assembling? Are you the ones who've been promoting about this Jesus fella? You know, a little white lie, you ever heard that expression? A little white lie is all they would have to say to protect themselves, their wife and kids. Tell me that wouldn't be tempting to say, not us, no, we're not into the Jesus thing. Hail Caesar. That's all they had to do. They just had to tell a little lie and they could have saved their lives. Is that what Jesus told them to do here? He says, you be faithful. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I'll give you the crown of life. Being faithful is more important than being alive. Remember that. Being faithful to God is more important than being alive. There are things worse than death. There's eternal separation from God and punishment for eternity. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 22, this is not in your notes. What is desirable in a man is his kindness, and it is better to be a poor man than a liar. Better to be a poor man than a liar. In answer to our question, when is it okay to lie? Point number 4, it is never okay to lie. It is never okay. If it's a lie, it's a lie. And it's a sin, and it's wrong. And it will always be wrong. And it doesn't matter what the circumstances are or what laws are passed to say it's okay to do it in this circumstance. It doesn't matter what man's laws are. The Bible says it's wrong. Revelation chapter 21, verse 8. But for the cowardly, the unbelieving, the abominable, the murderers, the immoral persons, the sorcerers, the adulterers, and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Lying is never okay. So what if tonight I admit that I am a liar and I need to stop lying? Last point. How can I stop lying? Well, number 1, you first have to learn how to be truthful with yourself. You know, the biggest lie of all is the lie that we tell ourselves. And we need to learn how to be truthful. Hopefully you're turning there to Luke chapter 15. I have a book that I've recommended, I don't know how many times. Learning to Tell Yourself the Truth by William Backus. It was required reading when I was at Bear Valley. It's an excellent book. It's not really a reading book, it's a workbook. It has assignments where you learn how to be honest with yourself. It's little assignments that you do, teaching yourself to be truthful, teaching yourself to tell yourself the truth. It's a great book if you can get your hands on it. That was many, many years ago that I read about it. If you're interested, I'll get you the ISBN number. I believe it's still in print. We need to learn how to tell ourselves the truth. In Luke chapter 15, we have the prodigal son. Verse 11 says, and he said, this is Jesus saying, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went out on a journey to a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in the country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country, and he sent into his field to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? Now, pause for a minute. He said, who is he talking to? Himself. There's nobody else there. He's saying this to himself. How many of my father's hired men, they have more than enough bread, and I am dying here with hunger. I will get up. I'll go to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. He had to have a talk with himself. He had to learn how to be truthful with himself before he was ready to come back to the Father. He had to sit down and say, I'm I'm lying to myself. And by the way, this is the only passage I'm going to read in this whole sermon that doesn't mention the word lying. And yet, as I said already, this is the biggest lie of all, is it not? It's the lie we tell ourselves. This is the biggest one of all. If you're going to stop lying, you have to first start by being truthful with yourself. We have to admit, I'm lying. We have to catch ourselves doing it. We have to be able to say, I just told a lie. That was just a bold-faced lie. There's not a lick of truth in that. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? We have to be honest with ourselves. We need to pray the prayer that David prayed in Psalm 120 and verse 2. Deliver me, or deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips, from a deceitful tongue. After we learn how to be truthful with ourselves, number 2, stop telling yourself that your lie isn't hurting anyone. We have an example in 1 Kings chapter 13. We're not going to read the whole passage, but a prophet was told by God, you go and you deliver your message, and then you come back and don't eat anything, don't stop there, you come back. Well, another man, we'll call him, he calls himself a prophet. He goes to the first prophet, and here's what he says. I also am a prophet like you, and an angel spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, bring him back with you to your house, so that he may eat and drink water. But he lied to him. That lie cost that man his life. Stop telling yourself that your lie doesn't hurt anybody. It does hurt anybody. First of all, it hurts your reputation. And your reputation, you're only as good as your reputation. A man's only as good as his word. That's what my dad used to tell me. Man's only as good as his word. Your lie does hurt people. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 28, a lying tongue hates those it crushes, and a flattering mouth works ruin. A lie crushes people. Parents, when you lie to your children, it crushes them. It crushes them. They look to you for truth, and you lie to them. It breaks their little world apart. Stop telling yourself it doesn't matter, that it doesn't make any difference. We need to be honest and truthful with one another. And kids, when you lie to your parents, it hurts them as well. Number 3, seek help from someone who is going to hold you accountable. Proverbs chapter 27 and verse 17, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. There's nothing more frustrating than any sin that you really want to deal with, and you feel like, I just don't have anybody I can talk to. If you're in that situation, you've got to get out of that situation. You need somebody in your life that you can talk to. You need somebody that you could go and say, I've got a problem with lying. That sermon that Curtis preached that was talking to me, I've got to stop doing this. And I want you to ask me how I'm doing on it, and I'm going to be truthful with you. I'm going to tell you, I'm not doing well, or I said this, or I was really tempted to do this. We need somebody like that in our lives. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. We want to be sharp, and we need the strength of one another. And then fourthly, realize God is watching, and He's hearing every word that you speak. God knows you're lying. Oh, you may fool people, but God, He always knows. And so if you love God, and if you want to please Him, you'll stop the lying. I don't know if I spoke tonight on something that is really a big deal for you, or maybe you're sitting there thinking, I don't have to worry about this at all. I never lie. Well, congratulations. That's great. I'm wonderful. It's wonderful you're in that situation. I think there's several of us that, if we're quite honest, say, here's an area in my life I need to change. I've got to make some changes. And tonight's a great time to do it. You know the drill. We're going to sing an invitation song. We're going to sing an invitation song. We're going to sing an invitation song. We're going to sing an